Brian, where were you in your life when you began thinking about making this film?
Shortly after 1/6 Right, which I made in 2005 and was promoting in 2006 and 2007, I was starting to think about what was going to be next. And so it was around 2007 that the idea was hatched. And in 2008, I went full time with living in the age of airplanes. So it's been about 8 years now from when I went full time till now. I'm just starting the promotion of the DVD and Blu-ray. So this entire time, it's been a full-time effort.
And your last two films, they were feature length or shorts?
They were, it was a feature. 1/6 Right was feature length, technically.
Okay.
It was a documentary. And then this one, I guess by definition, it's feature because over 40 minutes is considered a feature. But it's relatively short because it was for the IMAX format, which they need to turn them every hour on the hour. So it's 47 minutes, which is actually the longest, tied for the longest film of its kind. They're normally more like 40 minutes. So 47, we stretched it as far as we could to get as much in as possible.
Okay. In those 8 years, what challenges came up?
Oh my gosh. The challenges was, from day one, every part of the making of, I think, any movies probably, especially a documentary, very challenging. For this one in particular, because it was so ambitious. Unlike 1/6 Right was ambitious in its own ways, and it was my first film, which inherently is just, ambitious to set out on that path. But unlike 1/6 Right, that was shot in 1 square mile at Van Nuys Airport, in just literally the vicinity of Van Nuys Airport, this film was shot all around the world, 95 different places, 18 different countries, all 7 continents. And it's actually the first giant screen film or IMAX film to shoot on all 7 continents, and for a single one-off film. So Planet Earth actually has shot on 7 continents, but that's episodic, 10 or 11 episodes in television. This is just for 47 minutes, we went all around the world to shoot it. So it was incredibly challenging and ambitious with logistics and the planning, the traveling, everything involved, getting in and out of these countries, the different languages, cultures, having interpreters and drivers and permits, and just even the equipment alone, getting permission to enter and exit countries with all this expensive equipment. Always logistical challenges, and just even getting permits to be where we wanted to be alone. So it was months of planning before every single shoot.
I want to get into that in just a little bit, but I know doing some research, we saw different blogs that said, like most National Geographic photographers will just shoot so many photos, hundreds, maybe thousands, and only end up using a couple pictures. Every shot in the film is picturesque. Every one of them could be a Nat Geo cover. So how much footage did you get? And did you actually capture, and then how much did you actually end up using? 47 minutes, I guess, yeah.
So we shot 260 hours of footage total, and the movie's less than an hour, it's 47 minutes. So there's 259 hours of unused material. So the ratio is pretty incredible. But it takes that many hours to really get the best stuff. And many times we're waiting for the weather, we're waiting all day for a shot to happen. Sometimes we're waiting, come back a second day or a third day. There was a couple locations where we, after 3 days, still didn't have the right shots to make the sequence, so we had to change our plans, rebook our flights, and end up actually canceling another location because a permit at the next location was for a 1 day only, which we had to miss. But if we didn't push and didn't stay at the first location, then we would never have had the sequence at the first location. So rather than get on an airplane knowing we absolutely don't have it, it was worth sticking around, trying to get it, and then we'll figure out the next location at a future point. So that sort of thing happened more than once. And it was really, the ratio is maybe 30 seconds, I think, on average a day of shooting, it actually makes the film.
Wow. Okay, wow. Did you use more than one camera in the production, or was it the same camera?
We had one main camera called the Alexa, and it was right when it came out, and we were very fortunate to have it because it was the summer of 2010. And we were able to buy one because we wouldn't be able to rent one. They were almost impossible to get, purchase or rent. And even when you rent them, because we were traveling so much and we'd be gone for so long, and these kinds of trips where we'd have to extend it and come back later than we expected, that would really mess up the whole rental situation. So we needed to buy one and own one. So we were able to get one, and then we traveled with it exclusively for all that time. So it was like our little baby, and we had to really take care of this thing because we only had one.
Right, I've heard that before about the Alexa. So assuming everything went right, how much preparation went into each shot, and how much did you factor in error, and then how much did those plans change? 90% of the time?
You know, it was very fluid because, you know, we would have a shot list going into every location, and then oftentimes coming out of that location, we'd have, maybe we wouldn't get all those shots, maybe we would. A lot of the times we'd happen upon things that we never expected. Certain things would happen or fall in our lap, or a new opportunity came up, which was really exciting to always be open to those types of things when we're in these locations. So it was sort of, it was mixed in terms of getting the shots we intend to get, getting other shots and seeing opportunities that we never saw coming. And then sometimes it was so important that we get some very specific shots, we would just have to stick around those locations for extra days to make sure that we actually got those shots. So it was really tricky, like getting airplanes to be in the shot and contrails going up, as you saw in different ancient civilizations, all in the same shot. They're all real shots. It was important. It's very easy to add a little plane in the sky afterwards, but we didn't do that. We didn't, you know, it was important to actually show the real world and capture actual true shots, like that airplane coming up above the Coliseum, sort of juxtaposing old and new. And so we had people, you know, on the ground there, like on plane alert, we found angles where there was actually a pattern of planes that would come over the top. There was only 2 or 3 in a day that would actually do it. So we had to be in the right place at the right time, be rolling at the right time, because you can't see the plane where the camera is until the plane is already into the shot. So anyway, it was really, you know, fun, but a lot of logistics and planning and waiting. Almost like nature photography in many ways. Yeah.
Well, so that's what I'm wondering, because, you know, when we saw you in 2009, you had finished 1/6 right a few years prior to that, but you were starting this, but that was different because that was sort of your baby. Now you have more things on the line. How stressful was that?
Well, it's always, you know, making movies is stressful for sure. I was lucky I was making this independently, similar to 1/6 right, where I was able to create the film sort of in a vacuum, and then at the end seek distribution with National Geographic. So they weren't involved through the filming or the post-production. It was only at the very end of the film. So I got to make the film I wanted to make, take the time that I wanted to take to make it the way I envisioned it from the beginning, and then sought out distribution at the end. So it was a real luxury as a filmmaker to have that opportunity twice now with both of these films.
Right. So going back in the beginning of the 8 years, was that your plan all along, to approach someone like National Geographic, or was Emirates also one of the sponsors, or no? They just happened to be in the. Okay,
no,
sorry.
But they did a great, you know, thing for one of our premieres.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, it was amazing. That's why I wasn't sure if maybe somehow. Okay, and I think I saw one of the Emirates planes took off. Right.
Yeah.
So was that your plan? Did you have a list of who you were going to approach once it was finished?
I had some ideas who we were going to approach, and I actually did talk to National Geographic and some others early on in 2007, when the idea was just hatching. But I decided against actually going with distribution from the start. Just a strategic choice, because whenever you have anyone involved, whether they're financing it or going to distribute it, you're basically backing into their timeline, you're backing into their structure, formula, what it might be, and you know, basically they're going to be involved in some way, maybe a little, maybe a lot, in shaping what you're doing. And it was really important to me because this was a incredibly passionate idea that I had, and I wanted to see it all the way through in the purest form possible, with a single vision that I had for telling a story about how the airplanes changed the world, which is a really tricky thesis that you can do 1,000 different ways. It was really important that that would stay pure, and the only way to do that was, in fact, to be as independent as possible and to have 100% creative control. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do that with somebody involved, anybody involved from the beginning in terms of distribution, because you need to hit the mark that they want you to hit, or the mark that you've agreed to hit. And you don't have the flexibility inherently to go longer, to make changes, to have the story evolve, potentially become maybe much better, much greater, but it's different, or you're telling it different structurally than at one point in time on paper. And it's very difficult to be able to be allowed to do that if you have distribution in place from day one. So it's a risk for everybody to do this as basically a spec project, but I've done it twice now, and all has worked out.
Did you go with your DP, Andrew, to every location, or were there some that you had sort of people contracted out? Like, were you in Antarctica at one point? That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you actually went there with Andrew?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was always anywhere you see the camera, I was right there. So traveled to a lot of places. Indeed.
So there was never a time that you always made sure that the two of you were together with whoever else was around?
Yeah, us and then a couple other people. There was the only thing that was like a splinter unit was time-lapse photography. So the time-lapse is with a different camera. That's a special technology and a Canon 5D, basically still camera that does time-lapse. So a lot of times we'd be in the same location, and it was Ben Wiggins. He would shoot at night and we'd shoot in the day, something like that. Sometimes we're shooting at the same time in the same place, and other times we're sort of in different places and kind of leapfrogging each other as well. So those are the only times that I'm not with the camera as a time-lapse shot. Sometimes I was there, but most of the time that was he was on a splinter unit.
And were you using drones, or did you use actual real airplane for aerial photography?
Yeah, every aerial shot's a helicopter.
Wow,
so yeah,
okay.
No drones at all. Actually, there's one time where there wasn't a helicopter. It's an airplane in the Maldives, because there are no helicopters in the Maldives. They were outlawed many years ago. So we had to take a door off of an airplane, one of the airplanes you see in that sequence, the blue and yellow airplanes. We had to get permission from the government to get a door off, and then we had to basically commission the plane, charter it with the door off, and get waivers from the government and all this, and then that's how we did our aerial photography in the Maldives. But other than that location, every other time you see a shot from the air, it's a helicopter.
Wow. Brian, I just have to ask, because even though 8 years, I'm sure you lost a lot of sleep and it was frustrating at times, it sounds really cool. And I'm pretty envious. So how are you able to, forgive me for being so nosy, but how are you able to do this over 8 years?
Yeah, so I learned from 1/6 how important it is in the beginning to make sure to raise enough money that's going to see you through all the way to the very end. So because this film was so ambitious, and I knew that we were going to have an A-list narrator and an A-list composer and shoot all around the world and shoot with the best camera we could get our hands on, and it was just going to be an expensive film, that it was really important to be able to have all the money, not enough money to get started or enough money to get halfway through or enough money to just get through production, because I've seen that happen many, many times. And then you never get to finish the film that you started, or you find yourself in all sorts of situations where you're compromising, cutting corners, this sort of thing, and that's just not in my DNA. It was really important that this realizes the full vision of what I had first thought of, in an end product. The only way to do that is to be able to start only when you have all the money secured, and so it took a long time. It took the better part of a couple of years to be able to get that, and then when we finally did, it was 2010, late 2009, early 2010. We were finally in that position, and that's when production got underway.
With the film, is it playing in any other traditional cineplexes, or will it be in museums and science centers and IMAX theaters?
So it's been in, to date, 50 different theaters, all either IMAX giant screen or similar, and museums, science centers. Some of them are standalone IMAX theaters, like the Esquire in Sacramento, and there's one in New Zealand, and East Coast, all over the place, Texas. Air and Space Museum, Washington, D.C., IMAX, that's where the premiere was. So it plays mainly in those types of theaters because it plays for months at a time, which is really cool. Not only is it theatrical and a theatrical release, which is something I think every filmmaker wishes for, especially when it's, a spectacle in terms of its imagery and this sort of thing. But it doesn't play in typical cinemas or multiplex cinemas because it's a short form film, 47 minutes long. It was really designed for the every hour on the hour Museum Science Center, but multiple month runs, which is really exciting. So it's played, I think, 13,000 times now for 13,000 audiences in these venues. So it's pretty exciting. But being on DVD and Blu-ray and iTunes now is finally allowing everyone else to see the movie, but that don't otherwise live near one of these places.
And was this something that National Geographic secured, or did you already have that in place before you approached them?
So before I approached National Geographic, I knew that this was going to be where it would play. It was designed for that specifically, but I needed to find a giant screen, which is the technical term, a giant screen distributor, and they have those relationships. So National Geographic has an arm of their business that specifically specializes in giant screen film and giant screen distribution. So they acquired the theatrical rights to do that.
Sorry, last question. So Harrison Ford is the perfect narrator for the film. How much time did you have to chase him down before he read what his script was and watched the film?
Yeah.
How much time?
Well, Harrison is a very avid pilot and really passionate about aviation, and has the interest of aviation very close to his heart. And so when he he actually saw 1/6 Right many, many years ago, and I had since met him as a result of him seeing that film and enjoying that film. And so he was an acquaintance for many years, and I would see him occasionally. And then the day came when I wanted to present this new film that was under wraps for so long that I was making, that ultimately needed a narrator, and he was my first choice, and I was able to finally share it with him. But within a week of contacting him, letting him know I had a cut with a temporary narrator I wanted to show him for consideration to narrate, within 1 week of reaching out to him, he had seen the film. I was able to go to his house, show him a Blu-ray, and he basically on the spot said, yes, I'm in, I want to do this. And he was so committed through the whole process, it was really amazing. I couldn't imagine a better narrator for this movie.